We're going to take some time out of our lives this weekend to talk about what nobody talks about anymore and what everybody should, I think. And that is the 10 Commandments that I like to call the laws of the heart. Why am I so convinced that this is a contemporary and an urgently present topic? Think of your morning paper. Today, on the front page of our newspapers, on public websites, on social media, on the television in our living rooms, the modern Christian is confronted daily with a basic question, with some kind of serious social contention. For instance, which economic system is the most honest? They expect us to decide that and to make some kind of electoral decision. Which political party is most ethical? Which laws are most moral? It is possible, you realize, for even law to be immoral. Which national policies are most just? We're called, people like you and me, to rethink every day what it really means to be a Christian now, to be a carrier of the Judeo-Christian tradition, and to make decisions that will certainly determine the character and the quality of our future, as well as the present. We have to rethink what it means to be a moral agent in this society before we make any decision in our own lives, before we go into any kind of ballot box. We have to take adult responsibility for our lives, most of that for our world, or tomorrow may well be exceedingly more threatening, extremely less hopeful, seriously less spiritual than any we have ever known before. We have to begin to reconsider, you and I, what it means to be a moral person, a really holy person in an age when small, little, tiny, personal behaviors like the batting of a butterfly's wings, which the scientists now tell us can change the weather on the other side of the planet, affect not only our own lives, but the lives of people all around the globe. While scientists have ranked climate change due to global warming alongside international terrorism as one of the major threats facing the world in future decades, in the United States, we are still debating whether there is such a thing as global warming at all, rather than beginning just in case to save water. Experts are telling us, for instance, that people need 50 liters of water a day if you're really going to live comfortably. Even 25 liters of water a day will cover your basic human needs. But in Mozambique, as you sit here this morning with me, people have access to fewer than 10 liters a day. In England, British citizens use an average of 200 liters a day. But in the United States, we're using 500 liters a day. Each of us, each of you, me and you, every single day. In the West, we use 8 liters of water a day just to brush our teeth. And we're using between 100 and 200 liters a day to take a shower and consider ourselves more moral because we take a shower in the morning and then we take another one at night. Is it moral? When does it become not moral? What moral principles should we be steering by to make those kinds of decisions, and how do we know what they are? This country was settled and built by our ancestors, by people who came here to live the Judeo-Christian ethic, the 10 Commandments, the laws of the heart better. They came here for that reason. And they came here to lead that life more fully than they felt was possible for them in the lands from which they had come. In this changing world, it's time then for ask ourselves what meaning those things still have for us now. As much as for our ancestors? Less? Not at all. What are the 10 Commandments? And what do they mean now, if anything? Or are they obsolete? Who here has recited them recently, for instance? Who here has worried about them at all? If we are really a people steeped in the 10 Commandments, what does that mean for us in the here and now, in this city, in your house, on your block, in your life, in your schedule? Is there anything in them to really care about? Or are they simply artifacts of another world? Are they still really an authentic criteria for anybody's lives, let alone our own? In this series, then, on the 10 Commandments, we're going to look first at the historical understanding of a particular commandment. What did the Hebrew people understand by each one of them? And then secondly, we'll look at life as we're living it now and ask how these commandments, that one in particular, that next one over there, might still apply today, maybe. So let's begin first then to understand simply the place of law in early Middle Eastern cultures where your ancestors, your spiritual ancestors, and mine rose and lived. It's important to understand that the Hebrew commandments were not a unique dimension either of early society or to the era in which they lived. Every culture in the Middle East had laws. But until Hammurabi, the king of Babylon, that's Iraq to you, incidentally, who lived almost as many years before the birth of Jesus as you and I have lived after the birth of Jesus, or in other words, almost 2,000 years. When Hammurabi came, the nature of law itself changed. Up until that time, law was essentially the whim of the king. Laws were created at the fancy of the king. What I want you today is this. And the king could change them too at any time. Therefore, Hammurabi, the king of Babylon in Iraq, makes a giant leap forward in the history of public jurisprudence. What did he do? Simple. He wrote his laws down. He just simply wrote them down. And he bound himself, as well as his citizens, to his 272 statutes. He inscribed them in stone, and he put this stone pillar in the middle of the plaza. So for the first time in human history, people knew the laws that they were expected to live under. They could go out in the morning and read the pillar in the plaza and know what they would or would not be condemned for doing. For the first time, law ceased to be arbitrary. He pledged himself not to change Wednesday's laws on Thursday, so you and your family could adjust your whole lives appropriately. For the first time, people knew the laws under which they would be governed and judged. 400 years after Hammurabi, around 1,400 years before the birth of Christ, Moses also gives the people another set of laws to live by. But these laws were unique in that these laws were meant to reflect the mind of God, not Moses. They weren't Moses' law. Moses said, they're not my law. I've been given this law by God. These laws, secondly, were principles. They weren't prescriptions, what you must do on a certain day. It was just the principle of doing it. They were meant to shape attitudes and spirit. They weren't 10 laws. They were 10 words. 10 words meant to create human community. And these laws were not written to be argued in a court of law. Most of them were not legally enforceable at all. How do you punish someone for coveting, for instance, or not remembering the Sabbath, for instance? How do you drag somebody into court on that basis? How could you tell if in someone's heart a strange God might not be lurking? Point. The 10 Commandments are laws of the heart. They're not laws of anybody's commonwealth. They lead. They're meant to lead, not to restrict you from life. They're meant to lead us to fullness of life, not simply to the well-ordered or precisely directed life. Aristotle says that the perfect life is one where we contemplate, where we spend our life on, where we focus our life on the best, the most worthy things, the things of highest worth. The 10 Commandments tell us what's worth focusing on in our own personal lives. They're a new vision of what it means to be a good, healthy, happy, authentic human community. Only once in Scripture, in Exodus of all places, are the Sinai tablets actually called commandments. Once. In fact, they're not really statutes at all because they indicate no punishment for disobeying them. If you covet something, you're going to jail for 3 months. There is no punishment defined. They're instead referred to simply as the Decalogue, the 10 words of the community in dialogue, the 10 words of the dialogue that create the community in this town. They're 10 ideas, or 10 ideals, or 10 propositions, or 10 proposals that make the chosen people a different kind of people. There are 10 words about creation and personal responsibility, about praise and esteem, about the value of life and the integrity of our relationships, about veracity and honesty and self-control and simplicity of life. They're written, remember this, in second person singular. You shall, and you shall, and you shall. They're written to you for the sake of the community you create around you. The 10 Commandments are then an adventure in human growth. We are not convicted by them. We are to be transformed by them. It is not displaying the Sinai tablets in our courtrooms or on our yards that make us part of the Judeo-Christian tradition. It is becoming the sign of them ourselves that is important. It's in that framework, out of that perspective then, that we want to look at each of those commandments and ask, what is that in my life, to me and mine?